Hi, we're here to talk about the European External Action Service and specifically a project called Equipping the European Union for the 21st Century by Rosa, Balfour and Kristi, Raik, and published by the EPC and the Finnish Insitute of International Affairs on the occasion of the publication of the European Policy Centre's new issue paper called the European External Action Service and National Diplomacies. With me here is Rosa Balfour and Kristi Raik. Could you perhaps, let's start by talking about the economic crisis and the potential impact that the economic crisis is having on the creation of the External Action Service.
One can say that foreign policy has been one of the many casualties of the economic crisis. There has been simply less attention, less time to work on foreign policy matters, and it has been the economy that has been on the top of the agenda. Then also it has made foreign policy making more difficult, that the crisis has increased mistrust among the EU member states. But then at the same time, with the crisis, you have this accelerating relative decline of Europe's weight on the global scale, and therefore there is more need for Europeans to work together. So you can also argue that the crisis is pushing the member states to do more together. And also you have austerity measures in the national foreign ministries that are also forcing member states to look for ways of burden sharing.
And are there differences between how the crisis has affected individual member states? Have some foreign ministries been hit harder than others?
Yes, differences are clear, and they pretty much reflect the differences in the ways in which the crisis has had an impact on the EU. Where one can see that despite the fact that there still is a lot of national to national diplomacy, to national sovereignty, when foreign policy is concerned, we can see signs of an increased interest in looking at options that the creation of the External Action Service might provide for working together, for pooling and sharing resources, facilities, and I would also argue that there is a bit more cooperation or in working together on foreign policy dossiers. Even though some member states are particularly attached to a vision of their global role, which is perhaps tied more to the past than to the future, but even those member states which have a very strong national tradition of foreign policy see the advantages of working together at a European level.
Do you see an opportunity for the External Action Service to even end up replacing the national foreign ministries in the future?
Not in foreseeable future, no. And definitely if you ask either the national foreign services or the European External Action Service, the answer is no. And both sides prefer to speak about added value and complementarity. I would say there is more to it than complementarity. There are certain things, certain areas where the EEAS is actually doing certain things maybe better than the member states each on their own. Like, for example, there is much scope for shared reporting or more of common representation, but still the national foreign services continue to be there, and member states continue to have their own foreign policy agendas. Hopefully they bring these in line with the European common action, but there will continue to be this kind of complementarity idea, I think, in the foreseeable future.
Did the study, the EPC study, reveal particular areas where the national foreign ministries were more open to cooperating?
Well, for sure, the External Action Service is only 2 years old, and it's been a bumpy ride. It's been very difficult to bring together the elements of the EU foreign policy system in a service that works. There has been much progress, and there's one area which has been more successful than others and which the member states really value, and that is the role of the EU delegations. The EU has a network of 141 delegations around the world, and these are an interface with the countries in which they are working. The process of getting the delegations to coordinate the work of the national embassies, of getting the delegations to do more political work, has actually been quite successful. Of course, there's more work to be done, but this is one area where the member states are very interested in making further progress.
Okay. And where does the EU's foreign policy come from these days? Has it started to emerge from the External Action Service and the High Representative herself, or is it still coming from the biggest member states from a foreign policy point of view, the traditional powers like France, Germany, United Kingdom? What do you see happening in this regard?
Well, this issue of leadership is something where this project gave probably the most contradictory results. The member states see the issue of leadership differently. Quite a few member states, especially the smaller ones, actually do expect the European External Action Service to show more leadership and vision and taking initiative, being more bold. But so far the role has been rather modest. And at the same time, the smaller countries are quite suspicious about what they see as a too strong influence of the three biggest member states. But then again, the large member states with their own extensive diplomatic networks and vast resources, much vaster than the External Action Service, they do continue to pursue their independent policies, and they also have more influence on EU agenda setting than the others.
Okay. Do you think this struggle between the larger member states and the smaller member states on the other side will make it harder for the External Action Service to find common policy goals and positions?
I think we see different patterns, possibly new patterns emerging in the drivers of EU foreign policy. We have the big three, but of course the Franco-German relationship isn't at its peak, shall we say. The UK is uncertain about what role to play in the EU anyway, and there are other countries which are not part of this hard core, which are actually pushing to have a stronger role in EU foreign policy and for the EU to have a stronger role in international affairs, and I'm thinking in particular Sweden and Poland. So actually we're seeing a process in which there are different constellations of leadership. I think what we need to see, and this will hopefully come with time, is a greater centrality of the External Action Service in pushing, in driving, in being this as a real engine of EU foreign policy. So whatever attempts other member states develop, they should really think about making these initiatives inclusive and having the External Action Service involved. Without a central engine, disparate foreign policy initiatives are not really going to go very far. You need to have a system which is participatory. The External Action Service also needs to shape the agenda and not just forge consensus between the member states, but actually come up with proposals. I think this is something that many member states hope to see. Other member states hope not to see.